Hello, I'm Praon Silapanth. I hope you enjoyed the previous episode about the definitions and purposes of archaeological survey, as well as the methods of locating and recording the sites and the associated evidence. In this episode, I will discuss how archaeologists study archaeological evidence that we find during the survey. Before we go further, let us discuss first what do we exactly find in the field. As you have learned from previous video, the archaeological evidence can be divided into four types. They are artifact, ecofact, human remains, and feature. The artifact refers to any portable object used, modified, or made by humans, such as stone tools, shards, glass beads, bronze axes, etc. The second type of archaeological evidence is ecofact, which is any environmental remains and was not modified by human but relevant to human culture. For example, wood, animal bones, shells, plant seeds. Human remains are parts of bodies of the dead people. In tropical regions like Southeast Asia, we usually find human remains in the form of skeleton. The last type of archaeological evidence is feature, which refers to a non-portable artifact such as post holes, hearts, as well as monumental remains. The study of archaeological evidence allows us to understand how people in the deep past lived, what these people's daily lives were like, their health and diets, what were their thoughts and beliefs, what kind of society they lived in, as well as the natural environment and landscape around them. In archaeological survey, especially surface survey, not every type of archaeological evidence will be discovered. Different factors play into this. First, all evidence may not be available on the surface of the survey site, and secondly, it depends on what kind of activities did happen at this site. Therefore, what we can record are those present on the surface which are caused by both past and present human and environmental actions. In many cases, we find the artifacts in the cultivation areas when the farmers plowed their lands or where the people built some structures. So they dig into the ground and bring the soil underneath to the surface. The natural process such as gravity in the slope of the mound or water transportation or erosion of the topsoil also allow us to find the evidence. After we collect the samples from the field survey, we have to sort them out into groups, the process that is called classification, which allow us to understand what we find from the survey, what the remains tell us about what kind of activities took place, as well as when it did happen by dating the remains through dating methods, which relative dating and applying diagnostic artifacts are quite common dating methods for the survey. According to Sharer and Ashmore, classification is the process of arranging the archaeological evidence into groups on the basis of the sharing of particular characteristics called attributes. An attribute is any observable trait that can be defined and isolated. Then we can organize different kinds of objects into subgroups, so we can summarize the characteristics of individual objects and explain their variability in the same time. Moreover, the relationship among classes of artifacts will be suggested. This can be guided us to further questions or hypotheses of the study. The first step of classification that can be done after we collect samples from our survey is to categorize them by three basic attributes, including stylistic, form, and technological attributes. But before we divide the archaeological evidence by their attributes, we may begin our sorting of the evidence into two basic groups. They are artifacts and ecofacts. Then divide artifacts into subcategories based on their raw materials, such as clay-based, stone, metal, and glass. For ecofacts, they can be divided into florals or plants and faunal remains or animals. After we sort the archaeological evidence into two main groups, as shown in previous slide, here we focus on the classification of artifacts. The artifacts can then be grouped according to three basic attributes. The first attribute concerns the styles, which can be observed directly from the surface of each artifact, such as color, texture, and decoration. The second attribute is based on the forms or shapes of the artifact as well as measurable dimensions, such as width, length, thickness, and weight. For example, the pottery is sorted by their shape, such as pot, plate, jar, etc. In case of potsherds, they can be grouped by their parts, such as rim, shoulder, body, and base. Then we measure the size of each piece. Here is the third attribute. We are looking at technological features of artifacts or how artifact is made. This includes the raw materials applied to produce the artifacts and other technical characteristics representing manufacturing techniques. For instance, when we observe a terracotta figurine, we focus on the fabric of clay, whether it's coarse or fine, or the craft person who made it added any other materials into the clay or not. And we can consider the forming method, whether it's formed by hands or by mold. Then we look at the decorating techniques used for that figurine. This video shows how preliminary classification can be done during the fieldwork. After we collected the samples from the sites, then we have to clean them properly. Some of them, such as shirts, can be cleaned by water. After let them dry, we can start working. First, we put all kinds of samples on the table and categorize them into main groups, artifact and ecofact. Then we sort each type of artifact out into subgroups based on their raw materials. Apparently, what we have here are clay-based objects and stone tools. Sherds and clay pellets are members of clay-based groups. All sherds are earthenware. Then we divide the sherds into smaller groups based on the parts of pottery, which include rim, shoulder, body, and base. After that, we continue to class them into subgroups based on their stylistic and form attributes. For stone tools, all of them are polished stone edges in different shapes. Then we classify ecofacts into fauna and human bones. For fauna, we only have shells, which we can divide them according to their classes in zoology. And for human bones, we made them into subgroups based on their shapes. After we classify the artifacts into groups based on their similar attributes, then we have specific types of artifacts. So the term typology refers to the systematic organization of artifacts into types on the basis of shared attributes. Typology helps us to create order in the archaeological finds, and it can be used for relative dating as well. Here is an example of typology of terracotta roof tiles that usually discovered at ancient monastery in Ayutthaya period. Now, I believe that you've already had some ideas about classification from previous part of my presentation. So we will continue learning about the process of explaining the site in terms of chronology by applying relative dating method, which can be defined as temporal classification. As you have learned, the dating methods in archaeology comprise of absolute dating and relative dating. For relative dating can be divided into stratigraphy and typological sequences. But the study of stratigraphy usually applies in the excavation. For preliminary dating in archaeological survey that can be done on site, we apply a relative dating approach by comparing particular attributes of each object through our observation, and then evaluate their age by comparing their attributes of one object to other objects. This example shows how to apply relative dating by evaluating their age based on the architectural style. In this case, it can be assumed that the oldest bell tower is the simplest structure and the latest is the most complicated one. Besides typological sequence, we can apply artifacts that indicate specific time periods called diagnostic artifacts for relative dating as well. They can represent specific time periods when they were produced. The difference of technologies or development of technology or even the preferred stylistic in each period of time made the objects look chronologically characteristic. Thus, these different traits allow archaeologists to assign the remains to their associated